In a small, unremarkable office building on a tree-lined boulevard in Tel Aviv, there is no government seal. There is no identifying plaque. Yet from behind these walls, a single organization shapes global geopolitics, hunts state enemies across continents, and steals nuclear secrets from heavily guarded subterranean vaults. We know it by a single word: Mossad. To understand the culture of this agency, you have to look at the exact conditions that created it. As the Holocaust unfolded, 6 million Jews were systematically murdered by Nazi Germany and its collaborators, while the outside world largely watched. For the founders of Israel, the lesson from this trauma was absolute. The Jewish people could never again trust the guarantees of international law or the goodwill of foreign diplomats to keep them alive. On May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion declared the establishment of the State of Israel. Within hours, the armies of 5 neighboring nations invaded the newborn country. The war was a struggle for total survival. For a nation this small, losing meant national extinction before the state could even take its first breath. Surviving that initial war required early warnings of troop movements and intercepted communications. Ben-Gurion realized that for a tiny nation surrounded by larger, heavily armed adversaries, knowing the enemy's plans before they executed them was the absolute baseline requirement for physical survival. To centralize this capability, Ben-Gurion established the Institute for Intelligence and Special Operations in 1949. Crucially, he bypassed the military chain of command and the foreign ministry entirely. Mossad would report directly to the prime minister, granting the agency immediate access to the highest levels of executive decision-making. Mossad functioned as the physical, lethal manifestation of the vow "never again," operating as an aggressive safeguard against existential threats rather than a standard bureaucratic data-gathering bureau. By the 1950s and 60s, the agency's mission expanded outward. Securing the immediate borders was no longer enough. The State of Israel decided to actively pursue the men who had architected the Holocaust, no matter where they were hiding. In 1960, a team of 30 Mossad operatives infiltrated Buenos Aires, Argentina. They spent weeks tracking the daily routine of a man living under the alias Ricardo Clement. On May 11th, they grabbed him off the street, sedated him, dressed him in an airline crew uniform, and smuggled him onto an El Al flight bound for Israel. They had successfully kidnapped Adolf Eichmann, the Gestapo officer directly responsible for organizing the logistics of the final solution. For the first time, one of the primary authors of the genocide was forced to confront his victims in a court of law, standing inside a bulletproof glass booth in Jerusalem. It was a massive violation of Argentine sovereignty, but it sent a distinct message: Israel would pursue justice across any border. Simultaneously, the agency was embedding spies deep inside hostile governments. Eli Cohen, an Egyptian-born Jew, spent years posing as a wealthy Syrian businessman in Damascus, gaining access to highly classified Syrian military fortifications. The precise data he transmitted back to Tel Aviv gave Israeli forces a critical advantage during the Six-Day War of 1967, allowing troops to rapidly capture the fortified Golan Heights. These twin successes defined Mossad's global reputation. They proved the agency had the patience to hunt an enemy for decades and the tactical skill to dismantle a foreign military from the inside out. Following the 1967 war, a new threat emerged: Palestinian militant organizations, unable to defeat Israel in conventional warfare, turned to asymmetric terrorism. This culminated at the 1972 Olympic Games in Munich, Germany, where a faction known as Black September infiltrated the athletes' village and took 11 Israeli team members hostage. A botched rescue attempt by local police left all 11 Israelis dead. The massacre demanded a response that diplomatic channels could not provide. Prime Minister Golda Meir authorized Operation Wrath of God. Mossad deployed Kidon, a specialized subunit focused entirely on targeted assassinations and direct action, to systematically hunt down and kill the planners and financiers of the Munich attack across Europe and the Middle East. 4 years later, terrorists hijacked an Air France flight and diverted it to Entebbe Airport in Uganda, holding over 100 Israeli and Jewish passengers hostage. A military rescue was nearly impossible without advance reconnaissance. Mossad agents quickly gathered intelligence, including original architectural blueprints from a retired Israeli construction company that had built the Entebbe terminal years earlier. This animated map shows the staggering logistical reality. Armed with Mossad's floor plans, Israeli commandos flew transport planes 2,500 miles over hostile territory, landing under darkness. In 90 minutes, they killed the hijackers, neutralized the Ugandan guard force, and extracted the hostages. The 1970s transformed Mossad into a lethal, direct-action instrument capable of projecting physical force and executing complex military rescues across the globe. As the 21st century approached, the geopolitical landscape fractured again. The 1979 Iranian Revolution replaced a regional ally with a hostile Islamic Republic. When Israel later identified that Iran was attempting to develop state-sponsored nuclear weapons, Mossad mobilized against an enemy with vast resources and heavily fortified infrastructure. To combat this, Mossad evolved. Working alongside the United States, they are widely believed to have deployed Stuxnet, a highly complex malicious computer worm. By infiltrating the control systems at the Natanz nuclear facility, the code instructed the physical uranium enrichment centrifuges to spin at incorrect speeds. Hundreds of machines tore themselves apart, delaying the weapons program without a single bomb being dropped. But code has its limits. In 2018, Mossad operatives executed a physical raid on a warehouse in the Shorabad district of Tehran. In a matter of hours, they cracked heavily secured vaults and smuggled out physical documents and digital files containing the actual blueprints of Iran's secret nuclear weapons program. The intelligence did not stay in the shadows. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu unveiled the stolen archive on global television, weaponizing the raw data to argue that Iran was violating international agreements and lying to the global community. Modern Mossad operates at the intersection of old-school, high-risk human infiltration and bleeding-edge digital sabotage, attacking the logistics of their enemies on multiple fronts simultaneously. Operating with immense autonomy and extreme audacity carries severe risks. When an intelligence agency answers to almost no one, the failures are often catastrophic, public, and deadly. During the Wrath of God campaign in 1973, a Mossad hit team in Lillehammer, Norway, misidentified their target. Instead of killing a terrorist mastermind, they shot Ahmed Boucheki, an innocent Moroccan waiter who had no connection to the Munich massacre. 6 operatives were arrested by Norwegian police, exposing the assassination program to the world. In the 1980s, an Israeli intelligence unit crossed an entirely different line. They recruited Jonathan Pollard, an American civilian analyst, to steal massive quantities of classified satellite imagery and signals intelligence from the United States Navy. When the FBI arrested Pollard, the revelation that Israel was aggressively spying on its closest global ally caused enormous diplomatic damage. A decade later, Mossad agents bungled an attempt to poison Hamas leader Khaled Mashal in Amman, Jordan. The operatives were captured by Jordanian security forces. To salvage a fragile peace treaty with King Hussein, Israel was forced to surrender the antidote to save Mashal's life and release the spiritual leader of Hamas from prison. The very culture that allows Mossad to achieve the impossible, a tolerance for massive risk, a lack of bureaucratic friction, and operating outside international law, guarantees that its mistakes will be spectacular. For every headline about a captured Nazi or a stolen nuclear archive, there are hundreds of operations that remain completely sealed. The burden of this work falls on anonymous case officers and analysts who spend years building covers in hostile territory, knowing a single error could cost them their lives, with no expectation of public recognition. Meir Dagan, the director of Mossad in the 2000s, kept a photograph on his office wall. It showed his grandfather kneeling before a group of Nazi soldiers, moments before they shot him. Dagan kept it there so that every operative who walked into his office understood exactly what happened when intelligence failed. Today, the cafes and beaches of Tel Aviv are loud, vibrant, and alive. That open civilian normalcy exists because of a parallel world operating in complete silence. Behind the tradecraft, the cyber weapons, and the geopolitical maneuvering, the core of Mossad remains remarkably simple. It is an institution built by people who looked into the absolute darkest moments of the 20th century and decided they would do whatever it takes, break whatever laws necessary, and travel to whatever depths required to ensure they would never be defenseless again.